for most of my career, the way that you advocate for a more sensible posture on nukes, or like you advocate for just sanity on nukes, it was basically like ring the alarm bells of the imagination. It's like the Annie Jacobson thing, Jeffrey Lewis did the 2020 commission. Like, you paint a picture. I've done this in some of my writing in the past. Like, you paint a picture of like how bad the freaking apocalypse is, and it's like, look at how devastating this shit is. Or you have that imagery of like Terminator 2 Judgment Day, where it's like the fireballs just consuming you and the skeletons hanging onto the fence and shit. And it's like, this is scary shit, guys. That supposedly had some kind of impact on Reagan, the pop culture nightmare imagery. I feel like that's not super effective anymore, or like it's been done so much that it's like, if it's still necessary to do, it is definitely not sufficient. It doesn't have the same consciousness raising impact that it once did, maybe.
No, I mean, I think about this a lot. My other big subject that I write and think about work on is film. And I think also just like from the moment that I got into this field, like there's just these constant arguments that everyone is making that it's like we need to have some kind of more aggressive and powerful media strategy. And I hear that and I see that. And I don't know that the answer to that is kind of bringing this like very carefully wrought and like intense knowledge of the mechanics of a nuclear war to the public. I mean, I think that's one step, but I think it's part of a broader strategy. I would say, and I think it's fair to say that the American public, at least, is, overwhelmed with violent imagery to the point that we like no longer have any kind of shock reaction to it.
Yeah.
Certainly not the first person to make this point, right? And so I think if we think about movies, narratives about nuclear stuff in terms of shock, of like appealing to the senses in that way, it's not ineffective, right? And I've talked to so many people. I teach at an art college now. I've spoken to young people who don't even think about nuclear weapons concertedly, but they clearly have these images in their minds, and they clearly associate them with the kind of fear and helplessness that nuclear weapons really should inspire logically. But I think for me, the correct approach here is not necessarily shock, right? Or like, that sort of showing people that it can happen, because I think people still know that it can happen on some level. But the two ways that people should approach this, anyone I think who wants to bring out a larger media profile and a more effective media profile to nuclear weapons, is clarity of message, right? Like real simple clarity about like nuclear weapons are destructive, like they destroy human life. This is bad, right? Like you need to just really be clear about what you're saying here. And this is not like a call for propaganda, right? But it's a call for like an honest portrayal of what a nuclear weapon can at any moment do. And then the second thing I would say is repetition, right? Because if you look, if you go to any movie, I'm thinking of the Pharrell Williams Lego biopic, which I saw a few months ago. And there's a very clear moment where, like, sponsored by the Air Force moment, where he's like, the Blue Angels, like, look at them. And then, the Lego planes go up and you're like, okay, I see what's happened here. And it's like, that stuff is everywhere, right? And it's more or less overt. It's like either the sort of zeitgeist acceptance of violence to this very like clear, almost product placement. And I think at any possible opportunity, someone who wants to, eliminate the threat of nuclear weapons needs to put in an equally clear, message about what they are and what they can do. And I think that should sort of shape any kind of narrative strategy that you're using.
There's a thing that you talk about in the essay that ties to one way that I think is underexploited as a way of, raising consciousness about nukes, or raising critical consciousness, which is not just these things fucking suck as a war fighting mechanism or whatever, but like nukes also have high opportunity costs that are sort of not narrated. They're not in the calculation at all. Like they create sacrifice zones in war, but also in peace.